Hello, beautiful humans. It is hard to believe that it has been only a week since Lori Daybell's conviction. I guess it's been a little bit longer than that, but the days have all blurred together for me since I've been home. And today is Tuesday, April 29th. So I guess we're just a little over a week post conviction. And just 4 days ago, Lori Daybell sat down again with True Crime Arizona to give a post conviction interview. And that's what we're going to talk about today. It's good to see you all here again. I feel like I've been away on a super long hiatus. It seems like a billion things have happened since the last time we were together. And at the same time, it has really not been that long. So, for those of you who don't know, my daughter was married 2 days ago. So, right when I got home from Arizona, I hit the ground running, getting things ready for her wedding and welcoming family into town and making sure that all of everything was in place. And so you can see behind me her beautiful bouquet as well as the bridesmaid bouquet of my the maid of honor bouquet of my other daughter who came into town. And in just a couple of days, I'm heading out to see my brand new grandbaby who was born last Friday. So it's been a very busy time, and I haven't had a lot of time to focus on Lori, thank goodness, because we got a larger dose of her than we wanted or needed during the entire month of April. So I'm very, very excited to be back with you here. Yeah, we have real orchids. The Lego orchids have taken a backseat to the real ones. So I'm really glad to see you guys here this morning. And I have just a really short time to unpack this interview. Now, luckily, this interview is only 20 minutes long, but we probably could sit here and talk about it for a couple of hours. But I have a little less than an hour before I have to jump off. So we're going to just dive right in and get as much done as we can. Now, last time there was an interview with Arizona, True Crime Arizona. We played little snippets of it here on the video in accordance with YouTube's fair use policy, and they didn't make me take my video down, but they didn't allow me to monetize it. And so this time, I'm not going to be showing any clips. I will play a little bit of audio in the background, not live on the screen, and we'll see if that helps. If it doesn't, then we will have learned our lesson once again, but hopefully I'll be able to play just a couple of clips for you. So the most interesting thing to me about this interview, as opposed to her other interviews, is that this interview, I think, reaffirms to me that Lori is completely 100% in her delusion. And she absolutely believes everything that she has been saying to Colby and to others in her other interviews about what she really believes happened. It's interesting to see in this interview that when she gets a little bit of pushback, she pivots and she kind of goes down a different road. She's still in these tactics of not really answering the questions that are asked to her, but trying to get her narrative out there. And we see once again, too, that she's very interested in just what other people are saying about her. She wanted to know what the jurors said about her. She wanted to know during deliberations what went on. She wanted to know what the other interviewees have said about her out there in the public. And so that's really, we know that's all she really cares about, is what are people saying about me. That was really evident in what she did in the courtroom as well. It was really clear that she did not care about getting evidence into the record. She really just wanted to know what people had been saying about her. And of course, in typical manipulator fashion, she blames everything on the process and on the people who were involved, rather than taking responsibility for her shortcomings. She does sort of say, well, I'm not a lawyer. But then she does a really interesting thing, and she goes into this third person speak. She says, well, when you go in there and you don't know the process and you're not really sure of how things are supposed to go and you think you get to do a certain thing, she never brings it back to Lori. She never says, I wasn't sure what the process was and I didn't know what to do because she can't really even accept those faults or failings of herself. And so she puts it in that third person context. So it's really interesting. I'm gonna play just a couple of things. So the first thing they start out with is, and this is Brianna, who I met there when I was in Arizona. I have a great deal of respect for her as a journalist. I think she's great at what she does. And I think she does a really good job of walking that line between pushing Lori to, really think about the questions and sort of coming back and pushing on her just a little bit without pushing too hard. Because we all know if she pushes too hard, that Lori is going to just shut down and not say anything. So I think she does a really good job. Brianna does a really good job of walking that line. So I just want to play a quick thing. So Brianna starts out with the, your guilty verdict. Were you surprised by that? And Lori is just doing her little baby voice of, yeah, it was a bit of a surprise, I think in this case, when she does the baby voice, there are two reasons for it. I think the first reason is because Lori wants to appear relatable. She doesn't want to come across as overbearing. And I think especially for Brianna, she wants to be her friend. She wants to get close to her, and she wants to be trusted. And so she sort of softens her appearance and softens her approach so that she can get close to Brianna and be believable. And I think it's a tactic as well to see how much Brianna can be manipulated. So she definitely is using that same tactic that kind of has worked for her in the past to seem endearing to other people. I'm curious to know if you guys are going to be able to hear this or not. So I'm going to I just have it playing on my phone here, and I'm going to turn it up as loud as I can just to see if you guys can hear it.
It's not a secret that I had a near-death experience, right? I talked about it at my sentencing. And when you have that experience and you go to the other side of the veil, you understand, you have a life review. You see your whole life, everything that happened to you. And you see what's important and what's unimportant. And you see...
Yeah, so just curious if you guys can hear that or not. I don't know if you can, but Lori says that she had her near-death experience. She keeps going back to this again. And she says, you see what's important, what's not important. And these are the three things that she lists. She says, how you react, how you treat others, and the love that you give in life. Now, the commentary that I made when this interview first came down is that if you remove everything that Lori has done and you remove who she is, and you heard somebody else making these statements, this is not too far away from what an LDS person, a faithful, believing member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, would say. Because, yeah, we are taught that how we treat others is one of the most important things in this life, and giving love to others. And then she mentions a little later, finding joy in every situation. That's absolutely something that is taught by the mainstream church, and something that we are supposed to be, as members, that we're supposed to be. I kind of have to remove, this speak is ingrained in me that we as members. So I'm not a member anymore, but this is what I was taught growing up. And this is definitely something that LDS mainstream, LDS people learn. However, again, we have to go back to this near-death experience thing, because while I do give validity to sometimes there are people who have an experience like that where they, they have a medical procedure or some other type of thing that causes them to lose consciousness and they dissociate from their mind and body. And there's good evidence to suggest that there are chemicals in the brain that create this sort of experience where we think that we're in heaven. And I don't want to discount people who've had legitimate experiences like that. But if you've been following the case, you know that the first time that Lori made this claim that she had a near-death experience was in her allocution statement when she was being sentenced in her first trial. And other family members have confirmed she absolutely never said that to anyone else. none of the family members believe that she actually had a near-death experience because she never talked about it before that allocution statement. And if she had, that's definitely something she would have told us, as family members, because it would have given her sort of an elevated status. So none of us believe that she actually did have a near-death experience, that this is another one of her delusions that she made up. And again, as someone in the chat pointed out, see if I can find it here, Krista Gardner, no one has to die and come back to know what's important in life, okay? Those of us who are healthy individuals, we all know that treating people with kindness and respect is really important. And we know focusing on the good and the positive in our lives is important. Like, we don't have to have a near-death experience in order to know what we should be doing and how we should be treating people. So that's really all I wanted to say about that. Then as she goes on and she talks about the case, Brianna asks her, you had this list of witnesses that you were supposed to call, and you didn't call any of those witnesses, and you didn't testify yourself. So what are we supposed to think? And Lori goes back and says, well, that I was precluded from speaking about certain subjects. I was precluded from asking questions of law enforcement. She said she really wanted to get Detective Moffat on the stand. That felt really important to her, but she wasn't able to do it. She could have called Detective Moffat, but she knows there are certain things she wasn't allowed to ask him. And so again, she's blaming it on the process. She's blaming it on the fact that she couldn't ask certain questions. And she says, they don't really let you put on a defense. So she's kind of saying, well, if the rules were different and they had let me go ahead and speak, then I would have been able to interview these people and get the outcome that I wanted. So I'm just going to fast forward just a little bit to this one point. Because she goes on and on. If you're precluded, this is classic Lori right here.
It's the way that the system works, and it's what it does. And so, they precluded me basically from having a defense. They precluded you from talking about the things that would be most important to prove your case. So if the judge precludes all those things, what are you supposed to get up and say? I guess.
What are you supposed to get up and say? I just don't, that thing that she does where she drops her voice down, slurs her word just a little bit. Oh, goodness. Yeah, I love the behavior panel as well. I do watch a lot of their things because I think behavior analysis is fascinating. I don't think that it's necessarily concrete or 100% accurate all the time, but I think they make some really, really good points. And I hope that they do review these last couple of interviews as well. So again, she goes back to this referring to herself in third person. When they preclude you, what are you supposed to get up and say? So she's not, again, taking responsibility for the fact that she had no defense, because let's recall her list of witnesses. It was really her family members. And this is my theory. I've put this out here before, but I'm going to review it again just because I think it's important to apply it to what she's saying here in the interview. In Lori's opening statement, she references 3 specific dates where Charles and Tylee had really horrible arguments. And she tells us, of course, the evidence will show. She talks about these several different dates where there were these arguments. And then later on, I don't know if you guys were able to catch this or not, because I don't know if the cameras showed this, but in some of the little conferences that they had before the jury was brought in each day, during one of those conferences, Lori brought up that she wanted to show a video, and she wanted Janice and Summer as witnesses to testify that they had seen this video. And Lori's comment was, without this video, there would have been no bat and there would have been no gun. And so I think what she was trying to bring into evidence is that one of these arguments between Charles and Tylee, Lori had recorded. And she had shown this video to Janice and Summer as proof that Charles and Tylee were fighting physically with each other. And I think that her narrative was going to be the reason that Alex stayed over that night, the reason why they were prepared for a fight, why there was a bat, why there was a gun, is because of these fights and arguments that Charles and Tylee had before. And then later in this interview, she does say that was the catalyst for what Tylee did. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I think that's what she was trying to bring into evidence, was this video that shows a fight between Charles and Tylee, and then to bring Janice and Summer in to testify. Yeah, we saw this video. We knew that there was an altercation between Charles and Tylee, and that's why Lori was afraid for their safety that day, and that's why Alex was there. And so obviously I disagree with her narrative, but I think that's what she has been trying to say, and the quote unquote evidence she was trying to bring in this trial. But I think she just gave up at some point because she realized that the state was not going to allow her to bring them in as witnesses. And also the video between Charles and Tylee can't be brought in because neither Charles nor Tylee are there to testify as to what's being shown in the video. So that's considered hearsay. And so I'm sure the state, again, precluded her from bringing that evidence in. And at that point, she kind of gave up because she said, well, I can't put on the defense that I want to put on. And so I'm not going to do that. There's another part in here that's really telling, where she goes and she talks about movie quotes. And I can confirm, this is a family failing. Not necessarily a failing, but a characteristic of our family, that people speak in movie quotes. And you've heard Lori say and reference before that sometimes she and her sister Summer would have an entire conversation that was nothing but movie quotes. And it's a way of avoiding talking about your true feelings. It's a way of this common shared experience of, we all watched this movie together. This character said a thing. We all laughed at it. And so when you go back and reference that movie quote, it's a way of connecting with the other family members who watched the movie without saying how you really feel. And I don't know the specific movie she's talking about. I haven't watched it, or at least I haven't seen it in a really long time. So I can't say exactly what she's referencing there. But I can speak to the fact that a lot of times when there's a difficult situation, or you're trying to play something off in a funny way, like Alex did all the time, that family members would use movie quotes to talk about it rather than saying how they really feel. So let's listen to Lori talk about this real quick.
So I think of couples retreat. I'm a big movie buff, so I think of things, and I think I've studied yoga.
Okay, hang on a second. So she says couples retreat, and she says, I'm a big movie buff, and so I think of things. Again, we saw her do this in court, where the judge said, what is this person on your witness list going to testify to? And she said, things, lots of things. I have things. I know things. She doesn't want to be specific, because then she has to be held to it if she gets specific about something. And she doesn't want to reveal her entire defense. Well, she really just doesn't want to be nailed down to saying something that then is going to come back and be proven wrong later. And she doesn't want to, reveal herself in a way that she's on the record here. It's on an interview. So people are going to come back to this to reference it again. And so let's go back. She says, I'm a big movie buff, and so I remember things. And so now she's going to say this quote from Couples Retreat.
And Tai Chi and the Art of War. I mean, that's kind of like, it's crazy what really is going on behind this. So
it's word salad.
Whole another case.
Do you guys understand? Like, if we put this into a transcript and we read it back without any emotion in our voice, to read that back, it definitely does not make any sense at all. But she thinks she's making sense. Yeah, so there are going to be background noises, guys. I've got humans in my house who are living their lives, and my lives tend to interfere with that. This is a good point by Karen. The baby voice indicates an adaptive coping mechanism from childhood and often relates to abuse of some kind. I'm very small, don't hurt me. Yeah, it's one of those ways to make yourself small, make yourself seem vulnerable. And it's a way to sort of draw people in. And it definitely is related to some kind of an abuse. And I don't know how many of you watched the documentary about the FLDS, or the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that Warren Jeffs ruled over. but it was called Keep Sweet, Pray, and Obey. And that baby voice is a way of keeping sweet. It is a way of not being assertive. And so that is one of those tactics that gets used. So let's listen to just a little bit more of this, where then she goes, Brianna references some of the things that the jurors were saying about her. And of course, this is really, really important to Lori. What did they say about me? See if I get to the right timestamp here.
We were talking to the jurors after the verdict, and they had a lot of interesting things to say. One of them, interested to hear, they said, I didn't get to hear any of that. So
Lori's face absolutely lights up. Absolutely lights up. She would love to hear what they have to say. Let me see if I can get it to a freeze frame here.
We were talking to the jurors after the verdict. So one of them, we were talking to the jurors. So you did, we were talking. So
sorry,
one
guys.
of them thought not guilty until closing argument. One of them, interested to hear. They said, I didn't.
Just look at how excited and lit up her face is right there. She's so excited to hear what the jurors have to say. Yeah, slumber party talk, Krista Gardner says.
I get to hear any of that. So I'm sleeping. So one of them thought not guilty until closing arguments. Do you feel like you did not do enough in closing arguments to have convinced that juror to keep that decision?
This is where she says, I don't feel like it's my job to convince anybody. It's just my job to tell my side of the story. And then she meanders around with some more word salad for a really long time. What she comes back to, though, is that she didn't, she thought that the jury knew that Tylee was not alive. And Brianna asks her, did you want them to know that Tylee was not alive? And she sort of meanders around. And this is a really interesting part to me. She asks if they didn't know. Did they not know? Are you sure they didn't know?
Which they didn't know about your previous convictions, but they were correct. Did they not know? They did not know.
She asks it sort of in a sly way. Did they not know? Are you sure they didn't know? Because I think that Lori suspects that she's so famous and so fabulous and so wonderful that I'm sure that the jurors went and looked everything up. I'm sure that they did, because they couldn't resist, because it's such a big case, because I'm so important. They had to have known. I think when they said that they came into the jury selection, they said they didn't know about me, but of course they knew. I think this is kind of Lori's smarmy way of saying that. And then they go around and talk about that a little bit. Lori speculates this, and this is a really telling part for me.
Let's say you weren't. Would you have preferred the jurors to know that he was dead? Know that. I think they obviously did know.
I think they obviously did know. And she's really smug about it. So again, this is another way for her to avoid taking responsibility for what happened in court, where she says that obviously the jurors did know. They already knew about my conviction. That's why they found me guilty. It's not that I was guilty. It's that the jurors knew that Tylee was not alive. They knew about my previous convictions, and they definitely they voted not guilty, or they voted guilty because if they never would have found me guilty if they didn't know about Tylee not being alive. So interesting. Yes, and I do want to talk about this real quick. Eleanor Nelson says there was a juror who was interviewed right after the verdict who sounded like he found out before the final jury meeting. Now, there's a little bit of controversy about this because he may have misspoke, and I haven't watched every single interview with that particular juror. It was juror 15. I remember this man. There were a couple of instances. One, he had to be told not to be on his phone because he was texting with his daughter, apparently. And then there was another instance where he and another juror had a conversation about the amount of social security that Lori was getting paid. And the judge had to admonish him about that. Then in an interview outside the courthouse right after the verdict was given, this juror said, I was thinking about this on the way home yesterday, that she's going to be spending her entire life in prison, and that's really sad. So if he spoke correctly and accurately, that means that the very first day of deliberations, when they didn't deliberate at all, they were only back there 10 minutes and they basically said, we're going to come back tomorrow morning. He may have Googled at that point the case, realized that she had these past convictions, and then drove home thinking about how sad it was that she was going to be living her life in prison. Now, it could be that he misspoke, because from what we've been told by the other jurors and by other people is that immediately after the conviction, the jurors went back to the jury room and they were told, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we want you to know that this person has been previously convicted. She is serving 3 life sentences in the deaths of her children and Chad Daybell's wife. So it could definitely be that he misspoke. And when he was told, then he immediately started thinking about how sad that was. I just wanted to bring it up because it's something that people are talking about out there. And Lori, basically is trying to say that these jurors already knew. And that's the reason they convicted me. There's no reason that they would have. Now, I do want to talk about the aggravation phase. I'm not going to talk about it in this video. This video is just for the analysis of the interview, and I'm going to come back possibly later today and do a video about the aggravation phase, because I think Lori's response to that whole situation and everything that happened regarding the aggravation phase, I think needs some attention, and I don't think a lot of people are talking about it, and so I definitely want to do a separate video about that. So then Lori goes on to say that this argument between Charles and Tylee was the catalyst. And I want to go to that because that's basically her whole narrative.
I think that happened during deliberations, like maybe. Well, I understand where Tylee is in heaven. I know what she's doing and I know where she is. And so it's been almost 6 years since she passed away. I mean, this is the catalyst, right? What happened with her and Charles was the catalyst of her killing herself. So I was precluded from talking about that.
This infuriates me to no end, but I want to thank Shelley Schoenfeld for gifting memberships. Thank you so much for that. It totally infuriates me to hear her talking like this about Tylee. I think this is the most respectful, horrible thing that you can do to someone, is to victimize them and then change the narrative, change their story. When they can't tell their story, they can't defend themselves. And if I talk too much about it, I'm going to get super angry. So I'm just going to put that out there to say that it is incredibly horrible for Lori to put this narrative out there, but this is her narrative. This is what she has deluded herself to believe. And I think she really does believe it, because she's double, triple, quadruple down on all of these things. And THX 1138, she does use this tactic of trying to get people to agree with her. And I've noticed I do it sometimes as well. Like, since I started pointing it out with Lori, I've done it before. And it's something that I picked up actually from, I think, my brother-in-law. He's a college professor, and I think he does that as he's teaching. And I picked it up and have done it too. So I do notice that it's a tactic, and I'm trying to break myself of that habit, because that's not my intention when I do it. I'm not trying to get people to agree with me. I'm not trying to get people to, I'm trying to get people to understand me. And so I think that's why I started doing it. But I recognize that Lori does it right after she tells a lie. And so I'm trying to break myself of that habit. So after Lori talks about this narrative of Tylee, she goes back into this idea that she was wronged because she never did get to tell her side of the story.
She can't say that, and so not being a lawyer.
So yeah, she's precluded from talking about Tylee at all in court, and she's been precluded from using this narrative that she believes, because she can't reference Tylee at all in this case. Now, Trina K did file a 404B motion to use Lori's prior convictions in the upcoming Brandon Boudreaux trial. And it'll be interesting to know whether that happens or not. The final trial management conference for the Brandon Boudreaux trial happens on May 14th, I believe. And so I think that's when we will be able to hear whether or not that 404B motion gets admitted and whether the court is going to allow her to bring in Lori's prior convictions. Now, I hope that they do, because then there's a lot more leeway about what both parties can say. And I think also the jury needs to know that before they go into this, especially in this case, because Brandon Boudreaux was not killed. It was an attempted shooting. And I think when there's no death that happens, that the jury may be less likely to convict her because the evidence is so circumstantial.
And trying this, myself, like, I was always surprised, like, okay, well, I guess you can't really tell your side of the story ever. Like,
again, dropping her voice, slurring her words together a little bit. This is something that it's a tactic that she uses when she wants to sort of minimize what she's saying and have you not pay that much attention to her. So then she goes into this classic thing. Brianna says, you realize what the detectives are saying, that it's not possible that Tylee unalived herself. And she says, I'm well aware of what the detectives say. And what I would have said if I were interviewing her is that it's not just that the detectives are saying this, because what people say to Lori is, well, people can say whatever they want and there's no, basis of fact that I know what they're saying, but I was the only one who was there. That's what she keeps coming back to. But I think what I would have gone with is that the forensic evidence does not support that. The forensic evidence shows this definitive timeline that Tylee died first and that JJ died much, much, much later. So the forensic evidence, the science, you cannot argue with science. Mistakes were not made in the scientific evidence. And so therefore, you have to really go with what the science says. Anyway, it'd be interesting to know how she would respond to a question like that. She's always going to try and deny things and obfuscate and not accept the facts. But I think it would just be interesting to know how she would respond to the science argument. This is interesting. I have not seen this before, that Summer compares me to Lori. That's interesting. I mean, I guess it wouldn't surprise me. Summer is not a fan of me. She likes to try and tell people that I'm lying, just like Adam does. But, I think it's harmful to family members who have things to hide. They don't want me to be credible and they don't want me to tell the truth because that makes them look bad. And so that's the narrative that's out there. But anybody who's been on my channel for more than 5 minutes knows what my mission in life is, and it's to promote healing and to promote healthy introspection, taking a look at our own flaws and healing our own wounds so that more people don't end up harming their family members and having, harmful family relationships. Awesome. Yeah. I know that this narrative is out there. I've been well aware of it for a long time. I will just say that there's a motive. There's a motive for people to discredit me because what I say makes them look bad. So there's that. All right. Let's get back to Lori talking about Brianna says, this is what the detectives say. This is how Lori's always going to respond.
Arguments. But that phrase bothered a lot of people who know what happened in a totality, right? Who knows what happened in totality besides me? Well,
okay, I really want to show this to you because her chin comes up, meaning like, I'm more important than you, I'm better than you, I know more than you. important to see.
Arguments. But that phrase bothered a lot of people who know what happened in a totality, right? Who knows what happened in totality besides me? Well, there. I think everybody who's seen that you've been convicted of.
Who was there? I was the only one who was there. So interesting. I'm going to mute for 1 second because I want to fast forward through this video a little bit and get to the last couple of parts that I want to talk about because I am short on time. So give me just 1 second to get to the next part that I want to talk about. So Brianna asks her a very pointed question. She says, you were convicted, and Lori says wrongly convicted. So Brianna says, if you were wrongly convicted, then who killed them? And so Lori says, well, you've heard my interview with Colby. You know what I told him, what happened. She never actually answers the question. She just points Brianna to a different interview that she did. Well, you heard what I said over there, but she's not going to say it again here where she's being recorded, where she can be held accountable for it. Then she says that she's going to save that for her next trial. So she's going to wait until she gets in the courtroom again for the Brandon Boudreaux trial. And then she's going to put on her defense and answer Brianna's question. So I don't think that it's going to be anything different than what we've already seen here, but it'll be interesting to say. Just starring a couple comments to come back to here in a second. Yeah, and I totally agree with this, Heather Rose. Lori is criminally insane. We all know that she has these psychopathic qualities, and, not diagnosing her, obviously, because I'm not a mental health professional and, haven't been trained in that way, nor would I try to. But the bottom line is that she's delusional. She doesn't deserve any more airtime. And I'm really looking forward to when Brandon's trial is over. She'll probably do another interview after that. And I hope that that is the end of it. Now, knowing what I know about media and about the way that this whole situation works between media and the court systems and true crime cases and all of those things, if someone can get an interview with Lori, they probably are going to do it. And unfortunately, people are going to keep trying to get her in front of a camera because it means views for them. It means revenue for their station. It means ad revenue. I personally want to move on and talk about healing and talk about other cases that are similar, other people that are similar to Lori. In fact, I already have 2 or 3 things lined up that I'm already ready to talk about. I don't like that the media gives her this platform. In fact, at the end of her first trial, I said that I wish there would be no cameras this time, but I know that people are going to talk about it. So as long as she is out there, I'm going to continue to call out the behaviors that got us to where we are. So before we finish talking about the rest of the interview, this is the message that I really want to say. This is the thing that is the most important to me. And it ties into what I was saying with Adam and Summer earlier. If we don't, as a group, as anybody who is following this trial, if we don't see the patterns that emerged with Lori, if we don't recognize those patterns and then identify them in our own lives, we too are vulnerable for these types of toxic situations to be harmful to people. Now, not all of us are psychopaths. We're not all going to get all the way down the road to where Lori got. But that doesn't mean that psychological harm, emotional harm isn't being caused in family systems where this is the communication style. This is the pattern that I want to point out. People like Lori who are manipulative, who will lie to get their way, who see human relationships as transactional, who don't have the ability to form healthy emotional attachments with people. They will use a person to get what they want, and then they will discard that person. And this is the pattern that we saw with Lori. It's the reason why she's on husband number 5 right now, is because when she got what she wanted out of a relationship, she would make up some outlandish story about what the person was doing wrong. She would tell her family members, in this case, it's her family members, but sometimes people like this will just gather followers around them from the community, from other friend groups. It doesn't have to be blood relatives. I've seen this happen with women all the time in their PTAs, in their book clubs. And we call them flying monkeys, right? Because the Wicked Witch of the West or the East, whichever one, they're going to gather followers around them who are loyal to them. And how does this happen? Well, sometimes in an effort to find love and belonging, we are attracted to people who are powerful and charismatic, people like Lori, people who seem super charming and who have a large following, lots of people around them. And if we want love and belonging from that person, we're going to try and endear ourselves to them by agreeing with them, by sympathizing with them. And so what Lori would do is she would say, this person wronged me. Here's how. For example, let's talk about Charles. Charles had an affair and it really hurt me. And so I don't want you to talk to Charles anymore. She says this to her family members, to Summer and to Janice and to Barry. She alienates that person by discrediting them. She says all the things that they've done bad, which are made up, by the way, and then she tells the family not to talk to them. So what does the family do? They don't go to Charles and get his side of the story. Adam was the only one who was willing to keep talking to Charles and willing to believe Charles. Everyone else was Team Lori. We believe Lori. So she alienates Charles by making up these lies and isolates him so that he has nobody in the family except for Adam on his side. Makes up a story, discards them, gets the rest of the family on her side, and then in this case, convinces Alex that there is a demonic possession and he needs to die. Now, without that last element, we don't get to murder. But this pattern of using a relationship as transactional, getting what you want, co-opting followers around you, discrediting the person, and then isolating them, those things happen in family systems all the time. And this is the behavior that I'm trying to call. And if we don't recognize that pattern and learn from it, we're going to repeat it, and more people are going to experience psychological and emotional harm. Now, I haven't said everything that's gone on behind the scenes in my family, but this is what I have tried to call attention to. And what I see is Summer and Adam trying to discredit me, isolating me from the rest of the family. There are very few family members who will still talk to me. So I've been discredited. I've been isolated. It's the same exact pattern. And when Adam says his whole goal is to get families to talk to each other, all right, let's start with our family. Because when I asked Adam to be specific about lies that I had told, he would not be specific about it. So that's convenient because it doesn't give me a chance to respond. It doesn't give me a chance to tell my side of the story. So that's what I have asked of my family members, is that if someone thinks that I'm lying about something, please be specific about it, because I would like the opportunity to defend myself. I'd like the opportunity to tell my side of the story. And so this trial in particular, and I think the final straw for me, was reading the text messages and the emails that went back and forth between all the family members. It was very clear that Janice and Summer and Barry and Melanie were all Team Lori. They all enabled her dysfunction. They all allowed her to isolate Charles. They all were complicit in helping her to get done what she wanted to get done. And for me, that final straw was, I really don't want to have anything to do with any of these people ever again. I want people to recognize that pattern, that dysfunctional pattern. When somebody tells me don't talk to that person, the very first thing that I want to do is go talk to that person because I want to know why. Why are you telling me that? Why is it that you don't want me to talk to them? What are you afraid that they're going to say? I want to hear both sides of the story. So that's kind of what I have to say about that. And now we can get to the rest of the interview. And I really just only have a few more minutes here. So I don't know if we'll get through the entire thing, but I'm going to unmute again so I can fast forward through this so that I can tell you what went on in the interview and play a couple of clips. So she's talking about how being your own attorney is a lot harder than it looks, and it is really difficult. And she can't really talk about how what she would have done differently because she maybe is going to save that for next time. I do find this a lot in LDS families, and I'll tell you the reason why. I think there is a lot of expectation of LDS families that if they just follow the teachings of the church and read the scriptures and pray harder and follow Jesus, that all of these other things are going to be taken care of. And we don't really need to talk about our problems or try to solve relational difficulties, because as long as we're all trying really hard to follow the teachings of the church, then everything will work out just fine. So I think there is a lot of dysfunctional communication in LDS families for that reason. And I will say too, that that's one of the big reasons why my family members have such a difficult time with me, is because I'm critical of the LDS Church. And my mom has even said to me, she doesn't want to listen to my podcast because she doesn't want to hear anything negative about the church. And what I have to say about that is that negativity is necessary. It is necessary to the process of examining and healing and moving forward. If we're never negative about anything, it's that toxic positivity of everything's fine, we don't need to look at the negative things. It's so necessary to take a look at the things that aren't working and find out why they're not working. And that is definitely something that I see in LDS families. It does occur in other religions too. It's not unique to the LDS religion. And I will also say that it's part of the patriarchal society that we live in, and patriarchal religions in general, that female voices are less important than male voices. And that, you know, if you are a female who has a problem or who is critical of something, then you're not going to have as much credibility as, for example, male voices. And so that's another element of it as well. Oop, sorry. Just lost my little magnetization there. All right, going to mute just 1 second so I can fast. Interesting that Brianna asked, what was it like facing your brother in court? And Lori never answers the question. She says it was interesting. And then she talks about, you know, the days are blurring together. I haven't gotten much sleep. She just never answers that question. And I think it's probably because she did not appreciate the fact that Adam did not really remember the last time they talked. Of course, she was super offended about those green chili enchiladas. You know, that I think she kind of was sad about that. And, you know, she doesn't want to talk about her feelings about being rejected by her brother. Yeah, then she talks in this interview several times about being in lawyer mode. And yeah, thanks for reminding us about this, Stacy. Translated beings don't need to sleep. So I don't know why she's talking about her lack of sleep, because as a translated being, she really doesn't need sleep. But she talks about being in lawyer mode, where she says that she didn't really pay attention to whether or not her interactions with Adam were positive because she went into lawyer mode. It's another form of dissociating from her real feelings. Okay, I'm going to slow it back down so that you can hear this part where she basically says that, not being not being an attorney and that women are more emotional than men. I just want you to hear this little part right here.
Today I slept into it a little bit and I knew you guys were coming. I was like, I better get up because, I knew you guys were coming. But it was different than I thought. Did you think that your interactions with Adam were... It's hard because...
Rewound a little too far.
Being your own attorney, right? You're obviously emotional. Women were obviously more emotional than the men who get up and do it. But I tried to mostly be an attorney mode.
I find that so interesting with the way that Lori is so proud of herself that she would demur to say that women are more emotional than men when they get up there and do it. That's really like putting herself below attorneys who are men. That's really interesting to me, and I want to think about that a little bit. Yeah, and just so that the family members in Arizona who were around Lori, my other cousins, say that she was not the one who made the green chili enchiladas. It might have been Summer. I don't know. It might have been somebody else. But I will say the green chili enchilada recipe, I think, came from one of those Relief Society cookbooks, one of the Mormon cookbooks, because my mom made them. I made them for my kids. In fact, my former son-in-law used to say that like that was his favorite white people food. But yeah, it was canned chicken. You could use canned chicken. I usually made mine with fresh chicken, but even with the fresh chicken, they were still terrible because you're going to use canned green chilies, a brick of sour cream, mix that all together, roll it up in a tortilla and cover it with cheese with no sauce. That's not the way you make green chili enchiladas. I'm going to have a legitimate recipe on my Patreon. And yeah, that's just not the way that you do it. But that particular Mormon green chili enchilada recipe was terrible. So
try to stick to that. Well, and that's an interesting point because I think the difference that we saw with you versus if you had an attorney was sometimes there were personal aspects. For example, the green chili chicken enchiladas. That became a huge part of this that I don't think anybody had on their bingo card that was going to be part of this trial. But obviously an attorney would not have started going into that. Why bring that up? And what was that interaction between you and Adam like? So I don't know.
Okay, so Lori doesn't really know what to say, so she's definitely thinking about something. So here's another aspect of the LDS religion that played a lot into what Lori was doing. It was this prepper mentality of preparing for the end times. The LDS Church counsels their members to have a year's supply of food storage on hand in case of a disaster. And so if you think about a year's supply of food, it's a huge quantity of food. And so this canned chicken would have been part of that, something that's going to last a really long time and a way of getting protein. And a lot of those Mormon recipes in the LDS Relief Society cookbooks were like how to use your food storage so that you can cycle through it so it doesn't just sit there for 20 years and then get thrown out. So yes, that's what that canned chicken would have been used for. A lot of times would have been the food storage. Now Lori's about to reference that what she really wanted to do was when Adam got on the stand, she wanted to ask him about this made up fictional name that Adam used when they played school as children. Lori wanted to joke. We're a joking family. She's on trial for a very serious charges is what she has called it. And what she wants to do is joke about it. And this is another one of those family tactics, a way of avoiding talking about our real feelings, just to joke about things. So her first thought, the first question she wants to ask her brother, who was plotting some kind of intervention against her, was to make a joke. She wanted to start out with a joke. And I think that's really important.
I mean, it was different when it was up there with him because, you've known him your whole life. I was going to come
Again, did you notice that? You've known him your whole life. She's talking about herself in third person. Again, she can't bring it all the way home to her.
I'm funny. I'm always doing movie lines. Our whole family is like that. We're big on movie.
I'm funny.
lines. Like Summer and I will text back and forth in total movie lines without any words ever that are our own, just.
This is so telling also. Summer and I will text back and forth using no words that are our own, only quoting movie lines. And that just goes to say that we can't really talk to each other about how we really feel or what's really going on. We just communicate with movie lines back and forth. Definitely a way of avoiding talking about reality and a way of not connecting with our own emotions. Again, we see so many layers of dissociation and delusion in Lori. This is another one of those layers.
Quoting back and forth. And so I wanted to come in and ask Adam, who is Ernest T. Watson? And see what his reaction would be. Because
none of us know who Ernest T. Watson is, but apparently it's this fictional character that he used to play when they were, playing school as kids. Okay, I'm going to go back to fast forwarding because I just only have a couple minutes left and I do want to try to answer some questions. It's hard with my own family to be serious. Obviously, it's a serious situation. And she sometimes will look off camera to get approval from whoever else is standing in the room, whether it's the cameraman or whether it's the prison guards or whoever else is in there in the room. She wants validation from everybody. So she's constantly checking in with everyone in the room to see what was going on. Also, I wanted to mention that one of the jurors pointed out that Lori would look over and roll their eyes at them whenever some big evidence would come in. That's something that we couldn't really see all the time because I could see the side of her face, but I couldn't tell exactly where she was looking. And this is another one of those ways of connecting with the jury and trying to say, oh, can you believe what they're saying about me? This is so ridiculous that this didn't come through as not guilty. So interesting that Brianna asked her, would you call you and Adam estranged? And she says, not really, not necessarily. And Adam, it was very clear that he did not want to talk to Lori, didn't want to have anything to do with her. And yet Lori thinks that they still have a great relationship. It's another layer of delusion there. I'm just going to do a couple of these questions over here. There are some comments that I want to get to. And Irish Jen, I don't know if there's a way, if you're on your phone and you can screenshot some of these, because I want to address them in the next live that I do, because I'm not going to be able to get to all of them. But if there is this interview with Barry Cox, the only time I ever saw him appear on anything was in Sins of Our Mother. Is that what you're talking about? Because if there's another interview with Barry, I definitely want to see it. I've looked for it and I haven't seen it. And this is true, Lamisa. Thank you for saying this. I think that's true. Analyze the difference between narcissism and sadism. Lori's extremely sadistic and it's different than, so narcissistic tendencies are that inability to form human attachments, the inability to accept responsibility for your faults and flaws, and the inability to understand how your actions affect other people. Sadism is someone who takes enjoyment in seeing the pain and suffering of other people. So sadism and narcissism are not really the same thing, but sadism can be a trait of someone who's psychopathic. Again, this just comes from my own research and reading. I'm not a licensed mental health professional, and so I can't really speak to that as a clinician, but just from what I have read and studied about it. Going back to just fast forward through to get the last couple of, Lori was obsessed with finding out about Charles's dating life. And she said she didn't know that he was dating until she saw the discovery. So here is my question, Lori. How can you allege that Charles is having an affair if you didn't know that he was dating until you saw the discovery? This completely destroys her entire defense. And I hope her family members are paying attention to this, because she literally said she did not know Charles was dating until she saw the discovery. And that wouldn't have been until sometime in 2023. So how can she claim Charles was having an affair back in 2019? Now, when I was waiting for the verdict to come down, I did a super long 6-hour video. I don't expect anybody to dig through that. But I did read through a lot of the FOIA documents, and I read through a lot of the texts that went back and forth. And I found what I think Lori was referencing as the threatening texts that were coming from Charles, which I didn't see as threatening at all. And that's something that I want to do on the next live that I do as well, is to go back through those texts. So I'm going to do a video about the aggravation phase, and then I'm going to do one where we talk about more of the texts. Okay, one last quick thing that I want to get to, and then I've got to go. So Brianna asks her, do you still believe that Charles was a dark spirit? And she says that's something that, sorry, just have to text a kiddo real quick. Lori says that's something that has been way misconstrued, and Brianna asked her to clear it up, and she says, well, I don't think that we could clear it up in the last 5 minutes that we have over here. So again, she's going to deflect on that and not answer the question.
Obviously, I have to ask, right? Because so much centered around the you and Alex are some of the most damning evidence in this. Is that what they're saying now? That's what they're saying now. So how do you describe the you and Alex? So yeah, they've been totally and completely misconstrued.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mute. But she's saying that the texts between you and Alex are some of the most damning evidence. And Lori's like, is that what they're saying now? Yes, because that's literally the evidence. And then she says that the state makes up a story that goes along with whatever information they have. But there again, she's going to bring up this, I'm the only one who was there. I'm the only one who is able to tell what the story is, because nobody else is able to know what happened because they weren't there. Well, Lori, in the absence of somebody actually being there, there's scientific evidence, there's forensic evidence, there are the text messages that you left behind, the conversations that you had with other people that we do have evidence of. And so she's really delusional to not know that there's a way for people to prove what happened without actually being. Okay, I do want you to hear this part.
A story that goes along with whatever information that they have, right? They make it up. It's a made up story. They weren't there. They didn't experience it. So they have no idea. They have to make up a story, and then they have to stick to it. And then they put that out to the media, and then they put their narrative out, and then they stick to their narrative. So you've heard this for 5 years.
So interesting that, just another way of her to avoid taking responsibility for all of this. And then she talks about the be like Nephi thing, saying that, there are other Nephi stories where Nephi was courageous, and that's what she meant by that, to be courageous, to be bold. And then Brianna asks her, why didn't you call 911? And she said, that wasn't my responsibility. I thought that was Alex's responsibility. And she, even though she says that she heard the shot, she didn't feel like it was her job to call 911. I mean, you can bet 100 times out of 100 times, if I'm witnessing something, if I hear a gunshot, I'm calling 911. I don't care if I'm in my house or I'm in public or somewhere else, I'm calling 911. But she just didn't believe that was her responsibility. Does she have any regrets about representing herself?
Things will be cleared up in this trial. They filing up in a couple of weeks. They have lots to do for that trial and preparing and getting ready. And maybe some of those things will be cleared up in this trial. They found.
Yeah, she's not going to clear anything up right now, but maybe they'll be cleared up in the next trial. Yeah, and this is a good question too, Lisa K. How does she know it wasn't Alex who got shot? Well, she says that she heard the shot, and then she says, I went around and then I heard the shot, and then I came out, and then there he was on the floor. So she knew that it was Charles. However, my theory is that she got the kids out of there and drove away, and then Alex did 2 shots. And that's why Lori didn't know that there were 2 shots. She talks in all of her police interviews about the shot, the one shot. And so I don't think she actually heard it. That's my theory, but there's a lot of theories out there. And again, we weren't there, so how would we know? 1 second while I quickly fast forward to this is the last point that I want to get to. So funny about, talks about the prior convictions coming in, and what do you think that the judge is going to do? And then she tries to connect with Brianna here.
If the judge allows that, which who knows? What do you think he's gonna do? Well, yeah, I mean, we don't know. You tell me what you think he's gonna do, Brianna. You think he's gonna say no 404B? That stuff in? I mean, the judge was relatively patient with you, I thought, throughout the trial. Did you? Well,
Lori does not think the judge was patient with her at all. Raise your hand if you think the judge was patient with Lori. I think he was a saint with how patient he was with Lori. Lori does not see that. And that's, again, another part of the delusion, this victim mentality. Everybody's against me. The judge was not patient with me. He didn't help me at all. Lori, the judge helped him. The judge helped her so much, way more than he would have done if it was an actual attorney. Okay, here's the last thing that I really want you to hear. Brianna asks her, would you change knowing how things went in this trial, would you change your plea in Brandon's trial?
Would you change your plea in Brandon's trial? No. Why? Will I change it? No. Because I didn't do anything. So no, there comes a point when.
Okay, I'm going to cut her off there. But when she says that no, it's like, that's a ridiculous question. Why would you ask me that? No, I didn't do anything. So why would I change my plea? So again, she 100% believes she's innocent. She 100% believes that she's going to be acquitted in the next trial. And that's what's important to her. Near-death experience is important to mainstream LDS, sacred on some level, somewhat. It's people in the LDS Church like near-death experiences because the pattern of near-death experiences confirms what Mormons believe about the afterlife. And I think when you have one, it gives you some special importance because, oh, you've been there and you've seen it and you know what it's going to be like. So I think that's the reason. That's kind of the short answer, although I could do a whole video on that, and I probably should. And I think this is true. That was her way of saying, Adam, we're family. You know me. She's used that phrase over and over. I agree with this. Being surrounded by simpletons since birth has put her at a distinct disadvantage with the rest of the world. I agree with that. Michelle, can you go over the motion in Brandon's case where the state is requesting all info crimes be considered? Yeah, so this is a 404B motion, and that's just the name of the rule that would allow evidence from a prior conviction to come into a trial. And I am going to do a whole video on that because it is worth reading through the motion. And also I'm going to go over it at the final trial management conference that happens on the 14th. So I would love to spend another hour with you guys talking more about this interview and this video, but my time is super limited because of family things and going out of town. So I appreciate you being here today. Please hit the like button so this will get out to more people who want to see my take on the interview. And I am going to be going over the aggravation phase as well as lots of other things regarding this past trial and the upcoming trial. Stay tuned to the channel. I'm going to be on here as often as I can talking about the things that matter so that you can learn to find healing in your own life by recognizing the harmful patterns that appeared in this case, by calling them out in your own life, and by learning to look at your own faults and failings, to do that introspective healing so that we don't harm the other people in our lives. I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for all that you do for the channel and for supporting me. Take care and take care of yourself.